Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. And good evening. We are continuing our reading from the book Religion and Its Practice, and we are in the section called Hints on Practical Spirituality. And this is Atmavidyananda, correct? Did I get that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. All right. Very good. So let's continue. We're just about halfway through this section.
The Lord himself takes the responsibility for all. The Lord takes the burden of the blessed. The jnanis are afraid of birth. The devotees of the Lord only pray for devotion. They say, O Geshava, in whatsoever form may I be born? As a worm, bird, a deer, rakshasa, hashasha, or man, may I, through thy grace, have firm and well-established devotion for thee. In the Prapana Gita. The Master once told me, those who hanker after nirvana, they're little-minded. They're always afraid. Just as in the game of dice, some are always eager to get their pieces home. And once they reach home, they do not like to come out. These are ordinary players. But expert players, they never lose a chance of striking another's pieces, even if they have to get back their pieces from home for this purpose. And immediately after this, they again throw the proper number with the dice and get home again. They have full control over the dice, and they throw getting whatever number they like. Therefore, they're not afraid. They play without any fear. So I asked him, does this really come to happen? I certainly, replied the Master. Through Mother's grace, such a state does come. Mother likes him most who plays. She's not so much pleased with those who want nirvana, and thus want to bring the play to a close. Mother likes play. That's why the devotees do not want nirvana. They say, it's not good to become sugar. Oh, mind? I like to taste sugar.
Yeah, so it reminds us of when Swami Vivekananda said he wanted to just remain in samadhi and occasionally come down to have somebody stuff a little food in his mouth. And Sri Ramakrishna chastised him. Shame on you, I thought that you were much higher than that. And of course he was. That turned him around, and he was quite a man of service, and has sort of indicated he'll be back again to do service again when needed. So this is indeed a high state to be able to play Mother's game without any fear. Because it's not always an easy game. Sometimes it's pretty rough and tumble. So it takes a lot of courage and strength and knowledge in order to be able to play this the Mother's game without fear and in full knowledge, and to maintain that very difficult state indeed. One could say that is like the Vijnana state, where you go beyond just the idea of samadhi, but you come back in full control of what you're doing in this world. All right, so let's continue.
Great hankering for God realization is absolutely necessary. But then it's not good to get perturbed or disheartened at the fact that the mind has not become calm. One should feel oneself blessed if one can but patiently wait in making him the goal. He is making you think of him. Is this not by itself a great kindness on his part? Now to make the mind calm or otherwise is in his hands. It's quite enough that he makes you think of him. Pray that he may ever keep you engaged in his worship.
Yeah, that's a long paragraph, so I'm going to take a brief pause here. Reminds me of when I'm having trouble falling asleep, and if you keep worrying about falling asleep, then your mind is even more disturbed and you're less likely to fall asleep. So similarly, if you're trying to calm your mind and you're constantly thinking, oh gosh, my mind's not calm yet, it's exactly the opposite of what you're trying to do. So you have to be ready for the long haul, you could say, and just be calm and keep with the practice and not be worried about drawbacks and setbacks. You're just kind of there for the long ride, and you try to feel the Lord is always with you and helping you, and your guru and your inner guru are always there to guide you, and you're keeping a steady hands on the rein, even though there are bumps in the road. So that's not that easy to do. All right, let's finish this very long paragraph here.
Pray that he may ever keep you engaged in his worship. Why should you pray for getting the mind calmed down? Go on meditating on him like the farmer in Ramakrishna's parable. Never gives up farming because the season has been unfavorable. Think yourself blessed if you can meditate on him. Offer happiness and misery, peace and restlessness at his feet, and be content in whatever condition he places you. Learn to pray that he makes you worship him, and peace would come of itself. You've not to pray for peace, but for keeping you engaged in worship. The Lord's not like material things that you can get by paying for them. There's no end to spiritual practices that you can say that he has attained by doing so and so. You have to wait patiently for his grace, surrendering yourself to him. His grace will come of itself. By breathing practices or by any other method, nobody realizes him. He who has realized him has been able to do so through his grace. If he allows you to remain waiting at his doors, that is grace enough. What else is meant by spiritual practice? It is nothing but to take the Lord's name, being consistent in thought, word, and deed. Be not insincere. That's enough. If any more spiritual practice is necessary, he will have it practiced by you.
Yeah, so there's emphasis on grace, and of course, Sri Ramakrishna's famous saying about set your sail, the breeze of grace is blowing. So the spiritual practices are setting your sail, and you know, sometimes the breeze might be rather mild, and it might take a little longer than one might think. But you might have to be thankful because, you know, if it's a gale force wind, the wind of grace is a gale force wind, you might be in for a really hard ride. So I think sometimes our progress is slower than we think it should be because the Lord knows what we can handle and what we can't handle. And so, and there certainly we've seen incidences where someone might, you could say, have a sudden realization of some sort, and their mind is either puffed up with pride or disturbed in some way. And so just because somebody has a spiritual experience doesn't mean they can handle it properly. So you get that with some of the breathing exercises can induce some sort of states of spiritual consciousness that end up being disturbing to the person because they're not really ready for it. If you really haven't purified the mind properly, and prepared yourself properly, then you can't always absorb the grace that comes to you. So you have to be patient and allow the Lord to decide when it is appropriate for you. But it's always appropriate to pray to be the instrument of the Lord, to pray for patience, to pray that you can do spiritual practices appropriately and continually. That's the kind of prayer that one should have. And like that farmer, just because there are setbacks, you just have to keep going. I'm a gardener, and every once in a while I plant all sorts of stuff in great enthusiasm, and then come back and find that maybe the sprinkler system has not worked, and so they didn't get enough water, or the bugs have eaten them all, or something like that, and you just have to go back and plant again. So sometimes our spiritual garden is like that. You find that perhaps you didn't get the fruits you thought you were going to get. Also with karma yoga, if you were a pure karma yogi, you would assume you can undo all of your karma with new karma, but essentially that's impossible, because everything you do has some good and some bad in it. So it's always a mixture. You want to do the acts that have the most good and the least bad, but it's never 100% pure. It's like, if you've ever took chemistry and looked at the reagent bottles, it'll say 99.99% pure. Well, that's still 0.001% of something else. So eventually the good karma only prepares you for the grace of God. It doesn't finally get you there. That would be an endless process to get out of it just by works alone. Always grace. All right, we're going to, the next one is by Ramakrishna, which we've probably done recently. So we're going to skip that one and go on to the next section called The Goal and the Way. And if you're following along in the book, that's on page 69. And this one is Saradananda. This one is by Swami Saradananda again. So,
the goal and the way. If we think calmly for a while, we find that all the scriptures speak in the same strain and of the same goal. True, they teach the same truth. Yet this appeals to people when put in different ways. We shall discuss some spiritual teachings about the goal and the means to it. It is a trite saying, as a man sows, so does he reap. Scriptures, too, say that as a man thinks, so does he become. Success depends upon exertion. There is an invariable connection of cause and effect between right exertion and success. Whatever a man earnestly tries to do must meet with success.
Right, and of course, when I look at different religions, I often think in the ways, how does this particular path help you to keep your mind on God? That seems to be kind of the bottom line. Or your true self, if it's a tradition that doesn't have a personal God in it. So that's kind of the underlying theme of many of the different religious paths. Now, let's see, what did I want to say after that? Oh yeah, cause and effect and then so forth. Yeah, so that's, of course, again, the law of karma. It simply comes around again. We're going to have a talk this Sunday on speech karma, so that'll be interesting to see what Swami Vedarupananda has to say about speech karma and how what you think and also what you say. These things are all, in some sense, karmic. You're making impressions in your mind when you think. Of course, Swami Vivekananda said that the one who sits in a cave in the Himalaya and thinks good thoughts is still doing good to the world. So that's something else to keep in mind. Swami Vivekananda used to say, think you are free and you'll be free. Think you are pure and you will be pure. So he didn't like the predominant ideas in Christianity at that time about thinking that you're a sinner and that you have to be saved. He thought that was a negative thought to continually put in your mind. So now there are many paths in Christianity that no longer emphasize that. And I remember hearing a commentator about, I think it was the Crystal Cathedral, Schuller, is that his name? The Crystal Cathedral? I think so. He decided that the more positive approach was better, and he emphasized the Lord as the Good Shepherd. And he became very popular, tremendously popular preacher, taking that more positive approach rather than you're a sinner, and if you don't follow us, you're damned to hell, and that kind of thing, and fire and brimstone. So if you ever saw the old movie, the Disney movie Pollyanna, there was a wonderful scene where the preacher gets up and rails about death coming unexpectedly and that kind of thing. And he was a typical fire and brimstone type preacher, and Pollyanna managed to talk him into toning down his sermons and being much more loving and so forth. So one of those charming scenes in a movie that sticks in your mind. So, all right, let's continue.
Religion is hardly a matter of lecturing, learning, or teaching. It is a thing to be experienced. There may be many ways of spiritual practices according to temperamental differences of aspirants. This is why there have been so many sects in the domain of religion. If we analyze all the sects of our country, we can divide them under 4 heads, namely Jnani, Karma, Bhakta, and Yogi. Those who avoid sense objects and hankerings after them and remain content in the self alone take to the path of knowledge, Jnana. Those who, being in the midst of worldly objects and activities, find themselves very limited in resources and take refuge in the Almighty God are known as bhaktas, devotees. Those who work in the right spirit are karmis, selfless workers. There's another class of men who try to uproot the seeds of desires by looking into the very depths of their mind through concentration, and they are called yogis.
Now, suppose 4 people go to a restaurant, and one of them orders lasagna, and the other one orders a pizza, and the other one orders a fish dinner, and the other one orders a chicken salad. And each one is sure that they have picked the best meal. And so when they sit down to eat, rather than eating, they spend their time trying to convince the other people that they've ordered the wrong thing. Why did you order that? I had that last night. It wasn't very good. So, well, this is what people do in religion, it seems like. They become so convinced that their path is the correct path that they spend all their time trying to convince other people that their path is the best path, and they don't get around to much practice themselves. And so this is the danger of becoming kind of fanatical. You have to be dedicated to your path, and you have to know that it's the path for you so that you can stick to it. But that doesn't mean you have to convince everybody else that it's the path for them. So that's what he's warning us against here. All right, let's go on.
In Bengal, bhakti is more prevalent. We do not care to understand the rest. We think ourselves very weak. This is a great defect with us. The more we think so, the weaker we become. Such ideas are as harmful as pride. Both are impediments to real progress and ought to be shunned. This is what Ramakrishna used to say. Once the Holy Bible was read out to him. In it, from the very beginning, there was reference to the doctrine of sin. After hearing a little and finding that it talked of nothing but sin, he refused to listen anymore. He used to say, just as in the case of snake bite, if the patient could be made to believe that there was no poison at all, he would be all right. Similarly, if one constantly thinks, I've taken the name of the Lord, I am sinless, one becomes pure. The more we give up such ideas as I am sinful, I am weak, the better for us. In man dwells the Almighty God. We are part of God. We are His children, and how can we be weak? Our strength springs from Him. We can never be weak. So the greatest sin is to think oneself weak and sinful. To think like that is to be an atheist. If you have to believe anything, believe that you are His children, His part, the heirs to His infinite strength and bliss. Believe that your body and mind are the sacred temple wherein is always enshrined God, the pure, illumined, and free. Believe that He is in every man and woman, tree and creeper, and sentient and insentient beings. There's none else except Him in the entire universe. Try to see Him in the blue of the sky, the dancing waters of the sea, the face of a woman, the simplicity of a child, in the horrors of the cremation ground, and in the steadfastness of a yogi. Such an attempt is a sort of spiritual practice in itself.
Oh no, I wish I brought the CD player. We could have played that musical number from the oratorio. Many of these are direct quotes from Swami Vivekananda's complete works that were set to music. So anyway, we might do that next time, just as a reminder of what we read this time. So this is, the Christian scientists really took this kind of idea up. You don't, just like he was mentioning about the snake, you don't constantly think, oh, I'm going to die from the snake poison. You try to affirm your own true nature and a positive attitude. So things like religious science and Christian science took up this idea of positive thinking about yourself as a spiritual being. And of course, this is a part that we should all do. In the Abrahamic traditions, of course, the idea of Adam and Eve is very prevalent in how Adam and Eve had to leave the garden because they had committed the sin of eating from the truth of good and evil and so forth. So to me, that always just says that it's a metaphor for us having taken on this realm of Maya where there is duality. The original idea of being in that garden kind of painted a picture of blissful oneness where you weren't aware of the differences. You weren't aware, and the most obvious one is the sex difference. They didn't see each other as different in that way. So they were living in these very peaceful, harmonious condition, and then they fell into this situation where they saw good and evil. They saw pairs of opposites. Well, that's just the initial splitting into the subject and object. That's the initial veil of Maya, you could say. The veil of Maya comes down, and then we fail to see that everything is really made out of oneness, and we only see the duality. Now, the Vijnani is able to see both. The Vijnani sees the oneness behind and the multiplicity that it's become. So that's even a higher state. So this is the idea that we're trying to obtain. All right, let's go on.
This idea is very clearly expressed in the Gita. In the 6th chapter, Arjuna has said, in effect, senses run after lust and gold. Men follow the sense objects due to their attraction. Moreover, they have to remain in the worldly affairs to the last moment of their life. So where is the way out of it? The Lord replied, "Whatever being there is endowed with grandeur, beauty, or strength, know that to have sprung only from a spark of my splendor. The beauty you find in the sun, the moon, beasts, birds, and in the enchanting female figure is but a part of his splendor. His luster is manifested in all these. Men cannot realize their true nature and so get attached to them." The Lord says again, "But what avails thee this detailed knowledge, O Arjuna? I stand pervading the whole universe with a fragment of myself." Do not these beautiful words of the Lord tell us that we should not think of ourselves and others as sinners? Does he not teach us thereby that we should take man to be divine, the veritable image of God? Learn it yourselves and teach your children and neighbors the same. We speak one thing, do another. Unless there's agreement between your words and thoughts, nothing will avail you, even if you should take the name of the Lord or attend religious gatherings all night. Nowadays, there are so many religious societies, but people lose all interest in them after a few days.
Sometimes I think it's useful to think of the Lord as the consummate actor, doing a one-person show, or if you like the Shakta tradition, it's a one-woman show. And since the Shakta is usually thought of as what's manifest, that's probably even more appropriate. So if you've ever been to a one-person show where one person plays all the different parts, puts on maybe a different hat or a different coat or a different accent or something, moves to a slightly different part of the stage, they're playing all the parts. When the Harry Potter movies were very popular, a person named Jim Dale recorded them all, and he used slightly different voices and intonations for each of the characters and was able to pull off all of those different character portrayals in his recordings, and he did a wonderful job. So this is kind of the idea that we see all these different people around us, but we're all just really aspects of the divine, and we've all just been assigned different roles, or it's the divine mother or father that has taken us and become us to play a particular part. So that's really the kind of the idea that they're trying to get across here, and I think the actor with multiple roles is a good one. Okay.
What is the reason for this? The reason is our words are not consistent with our thoughts. The first step in religion is to be sincere to the core. Ramakrishna used to say that this is the foremost requisite in spiritual life. Where are such sincere souls? How many such souls are there in 1,000? In every work we do, our words and thoughts are variants. A small thing we cannot do, yet we rush in where angels fear to tread. We cannot give a little water to a thirsty man, and yet we run to organize religious meetings, preach divine love, and save the country by removing all its needs. Here is an instance to show how insincere we are. The Chandi says, "O goddess, all the sciences are thy expressions, and all the women thy various images." They've all read the Chandi, but how many of us are there who look upon women as images of the goddess? There are not a few who read the Chandi, but who at the same time do not hesitate to ill-treat their wives for a trifling matter. Instead of looking on them as images of the goddess, they think that women are meant only for bearing children and cooking food.
I remember one of those little cartoons, and this was in a era where there was a lot of fuss about the evils of technology and the industrial complex and so forth. And so the cartoon was a rock band using all sorts of high-tech instruments and equipment, railing against the high-tech stuff. So it's kind of ironic that they were using all this high-tech stuff and then railing against it. So this is the kind of hypocrisy that we find ourselves in, that we don't always do what we're preaching or what we're thinking that is appropriate. Now, of course, in the world of Maya, that's not always easy. We run into all sorts of moral dilemmas, you could say, in the realm of Maya, where trying to put things into practice isn't always that easy. There's always seem to be some kinks in the fabric of Maya, and so we always have to be diligent and work hard to do the best we can. But as we talked about in the last section, that's why you can't get out of this just by karma alone. You have to also pray for the grace of God and then be patient and wait for Him. Let's see. Yeah, all right, let's go on.
In the Vedic age, there were many women seers. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we find that in the Council of Janaka, a sannyasini named Gargi put very profound questions on religion to the sage Yajnavalkya. Lila, Kana, and other learned women of old are well known to all of us. Many of you have heard of the wonderful life of Ahalyabai, who lived not long ago. She herself did all the administrative work of her state, and all the big places of pilgrimage are seen, her acts of glory even today. The roads built by her for the convenience of the pilgrims, even in the distant mountains, bear witness to it. We treat as slaves those in whom lies dormant the wonderful strength of the Mother of the Universe. Only at the time of worship do we simply utter the words that all women are but the images of the Divine Mother.
Yes, it's not that long ago when the number of positions that women held was more limited. When I was a kid, most women were teachers or nurses or secretaries. That was pretty much the general scope of their occupations. There were a few physicians, a few women in all sorts of positions, but primarily it was still a time when most of the women were at home taking care of the kids. And nowadays, that's relatively rare. It seems like the economy of the current times is that it takes two incomes to support a family. So many times, both the husband and the wife work. And so, fortunately, the positions that the women are able to take have grown tremendously. Now, of course, Dianne Feinstein just recently passed away, and she was quite a trailblazer. Being in politics, it wasn't that common for women to be in politics, and she spent over 50, 60 years in politics overall, and was a senator for several decades. So she was probably one of the first women senators. Now it's we have more than that. I think I've told this story before, but I'll risk telling it again. I had a wonderful professor in college, a woman professor, and she told the story of her interview when they first interviewed her. It was rare. First of all, women being in mathematics was rare, and women being a mathematics professor was even rarer. It was like unheard of. And so after she was interviewed, one of the people on the interview team leaned to the other and said, "I think she's our man." But anyway, times have definitely changed for the better, and this goes for other pigeonholes that we tend to put different groups of people in, whether it's a racial pigeonhole or some other kind of pigeonhole. Even with all the problems we still have, it's a lot better than it was half a century ago. All right.
Again, our scriptures say, and we too proclaim, that all men are the images of the Lord. But what do we do in practice? We do not scruple to despise sweepers and other low-caste people, even to a greater degree than cattle. Those who respect cattle more than men, what brains can they have? If we believe in the scriptures, it is our duty not to think ourselves weak under any circumstances and to worship man as God. We must think that we are parts of God or his children, that this body of ours, as also of all others, is but his temple. As all the waters of the Ganga are from the Himalayas, so does all strength spring from the Almighty God. If we have this firm faith, we shall gradually improve. Wherever in the world there has been culture of knowledge, there men have come to understand that in man lies infinite power. It often happens that when we ask people to do any good or philanthropic work, the usual reply is, "Where's money? How can we work without money?" How foolish, I say, that we have lost our manhood. If we are men, money cannot but come. Money does not make a man, it is man that makes money. Shake off all weakness and try to be men from today. If you think yourselves weak, you can never develop your latent divinity. Rather, it will get atrophied. Believe that you possess infinite power. Manifest it by good works and good thoughts.
You know, that's one of the hallmarks of America, I think, is that people came to this country not knowing, exactly how it was going to go, but they knew that it was a place of opportunity. It was a land where people, compared to the old country, they were not put down. They were not stratified into certain parts of society, and they could work themselves up into higher positions. So that kind of attitude pervaded the American psyche. And even as a kid in the 50s, I can remember there was a very strong do-it-yourself kind of attitude. All sorts of magazines like Popular Mechanic and Popular Science and do-it-yourself manuals. So people wanted to do things for themselves. They didn't feel the need to always hire somebody else to do something. Of course, in the pioneer days, you were out in the Tules and you had to do everything yourself. You had to learn how to do everything. And so that pioneer spirit then carried on into the post-World War II era of prosperity and enthusiasm for a new world and that kind of thing, and all sorts of the burgeoning middle class and so forth, and the idea of owning your own home and doing all sorts of things for yourself. So that was a very positive thing because it built this part of the character that says, yeah, I can do this, I'll just read up on it and I'll figure out how to do it. And if I can't afford a TV, I'll buy a kit and make a TV. So that was the kind of attitude that people had, and at least in my family and people that I knew, that seemed to be a very prevalent attitude. So we need to carry that on through, because nowadays I find that's beginning to get kind of lost, and a lot of people, especially if you're very rich, you tend to have other people doing things for you. And if you're very poor, you may not feel that there's the opportunities, and you may not know how to rise up in the status of the society. So it's somehow that's beginning to get a little bit lost in the shuffle here. But hopefully people will bring that back in and become more aware of their own power and their ability to do things and work their way up. All right, let's go on.
Therefore, our first practice should be not to think ourselves weak, and to save ourselves in all possible ways from all sorts of weakness. The second practice should be to make our words consistent with our thoughts, In the Gita, too, we find that these two principles are advocated as the essential requisites for all aspirants before they take to any particular course of training. Arjuna fell into grief, sorrow, delusion, and fear simultaneously when he faced on the battlefield his own kith and kin, persons like Bhishma, Drona, and others. But then he concealed his fear, delusion, and said to Sri Krishna, "It is better to live on alms than to kill one's own relations for the trifle of a kingdom." At first he came to fight, just like a Kshatriya, for the cause of righteousness. But when he found his kinsmen and great warriors on the battlefield, he yielded to delusion and fear. He then forgot his own duty and began to talk irrelevantly in the name of religion. But how could he hide his thoughts from the Lord, who resides in the hearts of all?
Of course, the classic setup for the Bhagavad Gita of Arjuna's dilemma about what he's supposed to do and how Krishna talks him into that he has to do his duty. He can't be a coward and not do it. And again, so even though we try to see God in everything, that doesn't mean you don't correct people that it's your duty to correct. So if you're a teacher, you have to grade the students' papers, and if they didn't do it right, you have to tell them they didn't do it right. And if you're a doctor and you see the patient not following your instructions, you have to tell them, look, if you don't take this medicine, or if you don't change your diet, or if you don't exercise more, you're going to get sicker and sicker. It's the doctor's duty to sometimes use harsh words. And maybe your spiritual guru is that way too. He may have to say, look, you didn't follow through with all the practices you were supposed to do. So we have to do our duties in life, even though they may seem unpleasant. And perhaps we might kind of cover it up with this idea, well, I'm trying to see God in everything, so I won't criticize anybody or something of that nature. Well, if it's your duty to correct somebody in a particular situation, then that's what you have to do. All right.
The Lord said, "Do not yield to this unmanliness, O Arjuna, for it does not become thee. Shake off such a base faintness of heart and stand up, O scorcher of thine enemies. Weakness breeds all sorts of meanness. It is the source of all sins. What is the use of mere bread-winning education? True education consists in acquiring strength of body and mind."
Yes, Swami Medhananda gave a wonderful lecture maybe a month ago about physical fitness and how important it was to spiritual life. Now, some of us are born with bodies that aren't all that physically fit to begin with. And so you have to work with what you've got. But the more you can keep the instrument that you have as healthy as you can, the easier it is for you to follow spiritual practices. Although sometimes I've seen some people who are in very difficult physical situations, and that drives them into deeper spiritual practices. If your body can't do a whole lot, but your mind is still intact, then that's an opportunity to do spiritual practices. You don't have anything else that you can do. So sometimes that can be a blessing in disguise. All right, well, that concludes our time for today, and we can continue this lecture next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From from Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.